pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for attending this evening. Welcome to tonight's Planning Board meeting. Please be aware of the fire exit, which is to your left of this room. In the event of an emergency, please move in a calm and orderly fashion down the stairs and do not use the elevator. The meetings are recorded by the secretary for the purpose of a record in minutes, so please identify yourself each time you come to the podium and speak into the microphone. The board will follow the items in the order as they appear on the agenda. Extra copies are near the door. After the case has been called, the applicant and or his or her representative shall come to the podium, identify him or herself, give his or her address, and then present their case. The planning board members will then have an opportunity to question the applicant. In this case, if this case is a public hearing, it will be open for public input, at which time anyone wishing to speak to the board regarding this application will come to the podium, identify themselves along with their address, and direct any questions to the board. Once all public input has been completed, the applicant or site representative will be given the opportunity to respond to any public input. Once all public input has been completed and all questions have been satisfied, the case will be closed to public input, and the board will then move on to a decision. No further input is allowed at that particular point in time. We'll wait for our secretary with the blue shirt to announce our first case.
Our first and only public hearing tonight upon the matter of request by Thornton Engineering LLP, acting as agent for Danielle and Margaret Keefe, for preliminary and final site plan approval and steep slope, wetland, floodplain, and woodlot environmental protection overlay (EPOD) permits to reconstruct a single-family addition, detached garage, outdoor deck, dock and stairway with site-related improvements on premises 628 Seneca Road in an R2 residential district. Let me explain this for the people in the audience and people watching on TV and the board. This is an existing home on Seneca Road that overlooks the bay, and they are proposing to build an addition on the north side of the building and to demolish an addition on the south side of the building and then rebuild that as a two-story structure. They are also going to demolish the existing garage and build a new garage, which is out by the road. But those are really all building-related, building department issues that would normally not be in front of the planning board. The reason that they're here tonight is they'd like to build a set of stairs from the home at the top of the hill down the slope to the dock at the bay, and that set of stairs goes through our steep slope EPOD, and then it gets down to the bay, which is a wetland, regulated wetland by DEC, and it's also through woodlot. So what the board action tonight is an EPOD permit, and I've handed out two documents. One is from the New York State DEC. They have added, they have applied to DEC for a permit to build the stairs and in the 100-foot wetland buffer. And the DEC said your application is incomplete, and what they're asking for is the plan view, the top view, and the cross sections showing how the stairs would be detailed. And so that's pretty standard stuff, so that there won't be any stairs being built until a DEC permit has been issued. The second thing is at the fire marshal was asked to look at the building and do a review, which he has. And the short and skinny, and I believe this came from Board Member Ritchie, was the south side that the slope dropped off pretty quickly, and whether or not there would be adequate fire protection on that side. So the fire marshal has recommended that the building be sprinklered NFPA 13D, which is a residential sprinkler system, meaning you're not using metal pipe, you're using the plastic pipe, so it's much less expensive. And also, given Seneca Road is pretty windy, twisty way, so that is his recommendation. He also makes a recommendation that the engineer and architect are satisfied, or that the foundations for the deck with the hot tub be rebuilt, because there's a lot of lumber there that's just sistered on with nails to the existing posts. So we'll now let Glenn Thornton take over.
Larry, before we do that, could you also, if you would, for a matter of the record, read into the record what our own Conservation Board mentioned, if you would, as they
Sure.
weighed in on the
Yeah, it's good.
project as well?
Good point, Ray. Let me get there. Okay, the Conservation Board did a review, and in a memo that was dated July 2nd, the short and skinny is basically the spoils from the posts to build these stairs should not be pushed down the slope into the bay. But at its monthly meeting held on July 1st, 2013, the Conservation Board reviewed the application for the removal and reconstruction of a garage and house additions, as well as the construction of a wooden stairway from the house to a reconstructed boat dock in the bay. The Conservation Board recommends that provisions be made to ensure that all spoils from the excavation for the posts for the stairs are disposed of in a manner that erosion of the spoils into the bay is prevented. We also urge that any permits required for placing posts for the dock in the bay be obtained from the proper authorities. A stabilized construction entrance to the site should be provided, and vehicles leaving the site should be cleaned to stop the transfer of invasive species. Ed.
Thank you, Larry. Mr. Thornton?
Thank you. Yes, my name is Glenn Thornton with Thornton Engineering, 30 Assembly Drive, Mendon, New York, 14506. We're the site engineers for Dan and Margaret Keefe, and I think Larry's done a tremendous job explaining what our project consists of. Without reiterating, I think I'll just jump into some of the comments that we've received and kind of respond to them. First of all, the fire marshal's comments about sprinkling the building, this is the first that we have heard of that, which is not uncommon at meetings, planning board meetings. So that's something we'll look into. We understand it's his recommendation. We understand also that the south side of the house is going to be very close to that steep slope. Structurally, that'll be addressed with the building plans that are submitted and the foundation drawings that will be designed by a foundation engineer. But the fire access around that side of the building, we acknowledge it's very tight as it is today. We're really not moving the building any closer to the slope. We're going to be demolishing what's there and rebuilding foundations in essentially the same location as we have them now. So that's something that I believe we'll be discussing further with Larry and probably the fire marshal to see how we best address his recommendation on that. Larry mentioned our correspondence from the DEC. We are working with them. I've spoken to them. Since we submitted the application for permits from the DEC, after speaking with them, we're not going to be increasing the size of the dock. There's a whole new set of rules and justifications that we'd need to get into with the DEC to do that. So what we have proposed to do now is just to rebuild the existing dock in its existing location to the existing dimensions that are out there now. We are preparing drawings to submit to the DEC for the stairway to show how we can traverse the slope. We would have done that already, except it's very difficult. It's a steep slope, and we need to create some length. We believe that the the proposed 75-foot-long stairway is more than adequate to get down, but we're going to be detailing that, presenting those plans to the DEC, and I do not anticipate a problem receiving our permits from the DEC based upon their comments and my discussion with them recently. Conservation Board comments, I believe we have addressed those on the drawings now. Any excavated material from I think we estimated 14 piers, wooden posts, 4x4 wood posts would need to be erected to support the stairway and the landing areas above the ground. We would capture that excavated material and remove it from the steep slope area. The proposed stairway and landings that we hope to build are going to be built above ground so that we do not disturb the existing vegetation that's in place. We will be avoiding any significant trees. We don't plan to remove any trees for the stairway or platforms. About the only thing we might have to do is trim some of the low-growth vegetation, not down to the ground, but just enough so we can get the walkway and stairway in. We would leave the vegetation intact, so it should be able to survive to help stabilize the slopes.
Al, you have Mr. Thornton?
I am finished. Unless there's more information needed, but I think with what the information Larry gave you, which is fully accurate, and what I just gave you, I think that's complete.
Glenn, you said that the stairs are 75 feet long?
Yes.
Okay. This is a good thing. I just counted up the contours, and it looks like you've got a 40-foot rise up to there, so you basically have a 1-foot rise to a 2-foot run.
Right.
So you should be able to build the
I think
stairs.
it's adequate. There might be a little bit more than that. We might be from the deck down to the ground it might be closer to 45 feet. But I think with the
Right.
75-foot length, and we will be fine-tuning that, though, and it's going to be as short as possible. But as it is right now, there just isn't any reasonable way to get from the lawn area down to the bay. It's basically too dangerous. So we do need a stairway to be able to use the dock.
Right. I'm just saying that if you had said you had a 40-foot run and a 40-foot rise, the stairs would be way too steep.
Correct. Yeah.
So I'm just pointing out that the rise and the run seem to be appropriate.
Prior to commencing with board input, we would get plans, because the plans that we have obviously right now show a frame dock, where you're rebuilding it as opposed to, or extending it as opposed to rebuilding what's there. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and that would be submitted obviously to Larry.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. What I'd like to do is open it up at this juncture for the board. And what I'd like to do is a slight departure from what we normally do. For those of you who don't know, we have workshops every 2 weeks before every meeting. And a variety of questions, et cetera, are asked and so forth by all board members in a very casual manner. And what I'd like to do is, as we go through the board, is to make sure that the questions that they had at the workshop were adequately addressed so that they can move forward or ask further questions. Mr. Bellacci, if I can open with you?
I'm still catching up on the most recent information, so if we can go around.
Absolutely. Let me go the other way. Mr. Plukas.
Thank you. Just so I understand, so first of all, I thought we had a very valuable workshop, and I thought you came very well prepared, and there were a lot of good questions, and you were ready for all the questions we had. Just so I'm perfectly clear, the idea of expanding at least the beginning of the dock closest to the shoreline, that has been changed, and you're going to replicate the exact dock that's there now?
Correct. The
But you're
exact
going to
dock.
rebuild it anew?
Yeah, just replace the decking, it needs some work.
Okay. And I had asked at the workshop, there's no intention to light the stairs going down to the dock, that it's going to be naturally lit, but with no additional lighting?
That's true. I do have the architect with me tonight, Ty Allen from New Energy Works, and if it's okay, I'd like to bring him up here, too. I think he
Sure.
might be able to address some of the questions that might come up here.
Great, thank you.
Ty has a bad voice tonight, though, so bear
Okay.
with him.
Ty Allen from New Energy Works, 243 Main Street, Phelps, New York.
Great, thank you for coming. Is there anything, before we go, anything you want to add at this point?
No, I think they did a great job kind of, captioning the project. I think it's
Okay.
fairly straightforward architecturally, but yeah, I think I'm good for now.
Okay. I also just want to reiterate, having the fire marshal get a chance to get out there and visit the site, I think the information he provided is very valuable. I would strongly encourage the residents to follow the recommendations that were made by him, not only for their safety, but the safety of anybody, God forbid, that ever has to go and do anything on that site from any of the fire companies. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Plukas. Mr. Blatchy, we'll give you a little more time. Let's go to Mr. Goder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank you for coming. A couple of issues from the last workshop meeting that we had, Glenn. There was a question about the elevation of the garage. Larry, were you made aware of that?
Yes, they've applied for a zone for the ZBA meeting in August. Our garage height is 12 feet, which is to the midpoint, halfway up the roof between the eave and the peak. And the average of both sides is 12.25, so they're 3 inches too high. We're just going to go to the zoning board and make sure there are no issues.
Second question, anytime you're on a steep slope, my biggest concern would be stormwater runoff, and I think we talked a lot about that at the workshop meeting. Currently, there's a lawn drain, and I would assume it's the eave troughs off the house, 2 4-inch PVC pipes going out the side of that bank. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any erosion of the bank from any runoff water, but educate me, if you will, with a dry well like that, where does that water leach to? Just into the ground? or-
Into the ground, yeah, and we're capturing those 2 existing drains, one from the lawn drain, one from the roof drains that just discharge down to the steep slope. We're going to capture those, as well as the new garage and the total house building. We'll capture that with underground piping, direct those into 2 dry wells, one on the south side, one on the north side. And since our meeting, you noted that the lawn drain was tied into the dry well on the south side, and that hadn't been included in our sizing calculations. We have increased the size of that southern dry well. We added another 6 inches of depth. But the way they work is the water is directed in there. The soils out there are very well drained, very permeable, and it's sized to capture the runoff from a certain storm event, routed into the underground storage basin, and slowly leach into the soil. Now, with a more extreme storm event, this system will be surcharged, and what would happen is it's like the groundwater, the runoff water will be directed into this stone and chamber, and if there's too much water, it would bubble up to the surface and sheet flow. Some of it could sheet flow over the bank, as it does now. But that would be a more extreme storm than what the dry wells have been sized for. And I think they're around 7-8 foot diameter, 4.5 to 5 foot deep, something like that. I think we've showed on the plans. So there's quite a bit of volume in those.
Okay,
And
thank you.
this is all water that currently is just discharged down to the ground, and what doesn't just seep into the ground flows over the banks.
I'd also like to go back to the south side of the house. Boy, fire department or no fire department, that is a very precarious walk along that side of the house, and I'm glad I went to look at it, because I really didn't understand what Mr. Ritchie was talking about at the workshop meeting. I measure 4 feet from what I would call the foundation wall, although it's
Right.
not on a foundation at this point, but 4 feet to the edge of this, and you call it a steep slope, I call it a cliff. It's steep.
Yeah,
And
you
there's a
can't walk it.
cantilever, that sticks out about 16 inches. So even walking down that side of that house, that's the kind of site when I go on a visit, you wish there was somebody with you in case you happen to slip or something. That's a dangerous area there. And boy, I sure would like to see something done to either block that off from people just haphazardly walking down through there. That's probably not within our purview here, but They have a real concern from a safety standpoint on that south side. My second point, and I'm sure Larry's going to adequately address this, but the new one-story addition on the south side of the house, that is going to have what underneath it? Is it a crawl space proposed or a basement?
It's actually a screen porch, so the construction of the deck of it will be like a deck. It'll have piers with, concrete piers with 6x6 posts type
On the
thing.
south side?
Oh, I'm sorry, on the south side,
Yeah.
as you say. Yes, that would probably be a full basement. That's the plan right now.
And being that close to the edge of that bank, how do you even excavate that?
Yeah, we've spent some time. We're a builder, and we're most likely going to be the contractor. We spent some time looking at that. I think we're not exactly sure how we're going to handle it quite yet, but we've worked on some pretty treacherous sites before, so.
Well, I don't even know how you'd get a machine down in there.
Yeah, I think what we've looked at and talked about preliminarily is potentially using a real small mini excavator type machine, and we think we can reach most of what we have to reach from the west side of the house. I think as we look at it further with a structural engineer, if it becomes an issue, the goal would be to then switch to a crawl space or something like that. There's no particular need for a basement in that area, so it's flexible. We can do whatever we need to do with foundations. We're just not there yet. We're really at a design development level, but initially we've talked about basement if we can. So
I wish you luck. That's going to be a very
Thanks.
difficult project. And just my last note, and I'm sure you're aware of it, we made note of where the gas meter was on the north side of the building, and then there's a sliding glass door that's going to be removed. There's also the intake and the flue for the furnace coming out that wall, which I'm sure you're going to take into consideration. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goder. Mr. Palermo?
I'm all set, thank you.
Mr. Blanchi?
Sure, just, could you tell us again from the workshop, you said there's 2 trees marked to be taken down, but if you go there, there's already one down. Is the other one staying, or?
The other one the one that remains out there will remain. That was my error on the original submittal where I had indicated 2 trees to be removed. Actually, there was 1 to be removed, and that has been removed.
And then, when you were talking about the dock, on these plans, it's hard to see, because it is so steep when you look down. Is there a platform in front of that dock that's going to be rebuilt, or is that just a dock that's in the water today?
It's a dock that's in the water. I think it extends out in the water 30 feet or so, and then up onto the shoreline. That's the only area with a fairly flat shore area, so it extends up onto the shore a little bit. We're just going to rebuild that as is, and then the stairway will come down and either discharge onto the dock or maybe just shy of the dock.
So that whole platform you showed here is probably not going to?
That will not be built. The DEC didn't say that we couldn't do it. It's just much more difficult to justify an enlargement of an existing dock. It's much simpler just to rebuild it.
Okay, and you did read the letter from Fire Marshal?
I didn't see that letter, no. I haven't seen that yet. Thanks, Larry. Thank you.
Did you see it?
Is there a 3rd story of upgrade?
Definition. I don't know if this would fall under the definition of a 3rd story.
Okay. You don't have a problem with the hot tub and deck rebuilding?
No, I think that's what we're planning to do.
Pardon me?
The big brother.
Yeah. Big brother. Turn the air on.
How you did?
While they're
Okay.
looking at that, I just want to point out that having a deeper foundation under the south side would be better because it would take the load further down into the soil. And then from a foundation, your load distributes down at 2 feet down, 1 foot over. So it's a shallower foundation is going to distribute that load closer to the slope where you could have a slope blowout. So
One of the questions I was going to ask Mr. Heininger is, has anyone ever done a soil compaction study there or looked at it from that point of view? Especially, is this echoing, for example, Mr. Goder's concerns?
not that I'm aware of, but I've worked on some other projects down in that area of the bay, and we had basically a sheer slope while they were building a retaining wall and foundations, and you couldn't put your finger in it for over a month. It was basically hard as a rock. So when we get out there, we'll do some exploratory pits to see what kind of shear strength we're looking at, because you've got a sand. The other area was right down in the cove, but it was basically a sand with some clay in there, so it had cohesion. And as I said, it was, you know, when I was talking about it, the guy said, try to poke your finger in that. You couldn't really even scratch it, and it held. And the other thing, if you think about this site, they've had runoff off this house for probably 40 to 50 years, and there aren't massive gullies or erosion around this. And now that it's going into dry walls, I would venture to say 95% of the time, water is never going to be bubbling out of the top of a dry well.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Because I
So,
thought that
I
would be
mean, we
important.
were already kind of thinking, when this first came in, you're going, wow, this is going to be an interesting project.
Absolutely. No, thank you. I have another question, Mr. Thornton. There's a pumping station there as well, down the street. Has it been considered at all to tie into that pumping station?
Larry kind of explained the situation with the pumping station down below. I quickly assessed trying to get a sewer from the house down to it, and I kind of abandoned that thought because the existing on-site wastewater treatment system has an aerobic treatment unit already incorporated into it, which there's some expense with that, and a leach field that has been sized for the third bedroom. So when I checked with the Department of Health, we don't have to do anything with the existing wastewater field on site. It's adequate for the third bedroom that's being added.
Okay, so you did make that inquiry. Good.
We
Okay.
did, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton.
Oh, Larry gave us all kinds of information on that. I mean, we needed that up front, so that was good
Right.
information
Again,
to
we
get.
hadn't talked about that in the workshop, and I wanted to
Okay.
reiterate that or discuss that a little bit. At this juncture, does anybody have any more
So
questions?
can we go back to the letter?
Absolutely.
Get a chance to answer
Mr.
my
Blatchy,
question?
yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So now that you reviewed this letter, is there any concerns that you have just basically on what he provided?
Well, as the site engineer, I'm okay with what I provide, but I think a lot of these issues are really architectural, and probably there's some cost implications as well with the sprinkler. I just read through it quickly, and I don't think I disagree with the fire marshal, though, with some of his assessments.
Yeah, the only thing that I have a question about, we can look at it more closely, is it talks about the intent of creating a third story, which we are really not. I would have to look at what the definition of a third story is. According to the residential code, there's some criteria where, and Mr. Heininger can probably speak to this, you have to have a certain amount, I think, of exposed foundation for it to qualify as a third story, and I don't think that we're going to trigger that. So I didn't get a chance to really look at this very closely, but that's the first question that I have initially. So.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really it's a building code issue, and the fire marshal was just making the observation that you can hang out of under the code, you can hang out of a second-story window and drop to the ground and roll, and you might only break one leg or something, or your ankle. So you're allowed to do that. You can't do that out of attic window. So if the foundation is extremely high above grade, then he's just really calling out to the architect that you may want to look at this. The other thing that Greg Merrick and I talked about today was whether or not sprinklers only in that south addition would be a solid idea and not sprinkler the whole structure. And again, it was that if the firefighters, if there was a fire in that south addition and the firefighters really just can't get there because of the slope, you're going to lose that part of the building.
Yeah.
If it's sprinklered, you won't lose that part of the building.
So my question then, are we saying that we do need to sprinkle this property, or that it's recommended that we sprinkle the property?
It's recommended. I mean, it's basically brought,
That could
Greg
be-
looked at it, brought up these observations of the fire marshal. We have the design professional here. We'll talk to the client, and then we'll take it from the building department, how they want to handle it.
Mr. Goder, though, if I'm not mistaken, that can be a condition for approval, based on your assessment
Yeah.
and mutual assessment of the board.
Right.
at this juncture.
It could also be subject to the approval of the fire marshal.
Exactly. Mr.
So
Black?
one more question. In his last paragraph, he talks about stability, and we talked a lot about stability on the south side, but he talks specifically around stability of the hot tub, and he recommends that an additional engineering report on its stability and safety be performed. So I don't know exactly what that would be, Larry, but what is he asking for?
Some of the pictures show the foundation of the hot tub, and the point is that the existing main deck is going to be completely rebuilt. And we're saying that you probably ought to take a hard look at the condition and the framing of the hot tub deck, because as code enforcement, when we're out there looking at the structure, if we see that the hot tub deck has substandard connections and framing, we're going to have you fix those too.
Yeah, and it's our intent right now, actually, that hot tub deck is going to go away as part of the construction of the new deck and probably not come back. I don't think the owners, I don't know for sure, but I don't think they have any intention of having that functionality on their deck for a hot tub, so.
Well, it says on the plans, though, existing hot tub and deck to remain.
So revise the drawing.
Okay. Yeah, let that go.
Mr. Blatch, any other questions?
That's it, right?
Thank you. I'd like to now open it up to public input. Anyone who wishes to speak in favor of this particular application, please come forward, state your name and address. As there are none, anyone who would like to speak against this particular application, please come forward, state your name and address. Seeing none, I'd like to close public input and throw it back to the board. Mr. Lucas, any further questions?
No.
Mr. Blatchy?
No.
Mr. Goder?
I would like to see a stipulation regarding the hot tub deck, either that it is structurally repaired or eliminated, but some clarification in terms of what we're going to do with that hot tub deck.
Well, I'd like to see the plans, Mr. Goder, I'd actually like to see the plans redone and completed correctly without, as it relates to the dock, as it relates to the hot tub, et cetera. Would that meet your approval?
Certainly.
Okay. Mr. Palermo?
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm all set.
Okay. Mr. Relli, you sound like you want to say something.
No, I'm just fascinated by how thorough the board is.
Sounds good. At this juncture, based because it is a DEC application and so forth, and we do need a seeker determination, if someone would like to make a motion as it relates to seeker? I do that best? I want to let Mr. Palukas do it, if he's so inclined.
I'm not inclined.
Is it type 2 unlisted?
Yeah.
I can do it.
Yes.
So, upon the matter of PB 1307-1, request approval of seeker type 2 unlisted action.
Can I have a second?
I'll second. I second it. Sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? And we have two absences, Mr. Weiner and Mr. Ritchie. Motion carries.
And now your action, now that you've completed seeker, that there won't be a significant environmental impact by your action is to grant an EPOD permit, subject to DEC permit approval.
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman, at this point, then, Planning Board 1307-1, upon the matter of request by Thornton Engineering LLP, acting as agent for Daniel and Margaret Keefe, for preliminary and final site plan approval and steep slope, wetland, floodplain, and woodlot environmental protection overlay, EPOD permits, to reconstruct a single-family addition, detached garage, outdoor deck, dock, and stairway with site-related improvements on premises 628 Seneca Road in an R2 residential district, with two conditions, the first being DEC approval with regard to the replacement of the existing dock, and secondly, that new plans be submitted that outline and adequately detail the new dock and the hot tub removal on that floor.
Can we add one addition, Rich? That it be updated for the tree removal also, the tree that's remaining.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Mr. Boucher.
The tree that's remaining.
It was removed already, and one that's going to stay.
I'd like to have, would anyone like to weigh in on the sprinkler issue?
Can we
As it
strongly
relates-
recommend, or do you have
Yeah,
to go one way?
I
or the other?
personally feel it's something that should be strongly recommended, but I don't think it should be part of the actual motion.
It's not code regulated. And I think that, well, we have nothing but respect for Mr. Merrick's observations. He's indicating that this would be the best way to protect the property. But he does indicate in his opening sentence, it shouldn't be overlooked, the alterations don't create a third story above grade. So it's my opinion, and again, I always tell you that regardless of the opinion I have regarding the law, I'm not taking a position on whether you should grant or not grant the application. But there isn't an issue with regard to sprinkler system here because it's not code. That could be between the applicant and the town as they issue the building permit. They could talk about whether it's advisable or not required.
Dan,
Yes.
the addition of the sprinkler system ideally benefits only the resident.
Well, I mean, in a sense, that's true, but I think as Larry indicated, it does benefit the firefighters if there should be an issue down there. But again, I think that my advice to you regarding the mandate in the code is that it doesn't exist. So that's going to be between when the plans are submitted for a permit. I don't think the plans could be rejected if that particular component is absent. But I have a feeling that that the builders will negotiate that with the town with regard to the permit.
Refresh my memory. Did we not say in the workshop that numerous residences along the bay replicate this, and those fires on that side or bay side were fought by boat? Did I imagine this?
No,
If they were fought by fireboat that comes out of the river harbor, and that's, they might have fought ones down right on the shoreline, like German Village, but I don't think they'd fight anything 45 feet above the level of the bay,
Okay,
in the trees.
all right.
Yeah, they're fought, I mean, and largely, and I mean, it's probably based upon my experience of living in that area for probably, I think, more than 30 years, and not being a firefighting expert, but it's a one-sided fight. I mean, they're going to come down from the road and from wherever they're able to get to. And that, by the way, is reflected in the premium that the homeowner pays for their fire insurance.
More than likely.
It is. I live, and don't like to mix personal components with legal advice, but I also live on the cliff side, and that's clearly reflected in your premium.
Right. The other thing, Mike, is now that the hot tub is disappearing, the eastern elevation of that addition is now accessible and not on the edge of cliff. So now we go from one side accessible to a second side with only the third southern exposure close to the edge of the steep slope. So to go on with Dan saying, this is really a code issue. The code does not require the sprinkler system. It's an observation by the fire marshal of what would be a safer situation, but it's really not a board. You know, it's not, I would recommend it's not an area the board should go. It's a New York State code issue and up to the design professional.
I agree. I agree with the recommendation and the sentiment of Mr. Palermo, the recommendation of Mr. Plukas. I would strongly recommend it myself for the safety of our new neighbors on the bay, as well as those who may potentially be trying to avert disaster. So,
But not part of our motion.
but as we strongly recommend. Is that what you were saying, Mr. Plukas?
Yes.
Can you agree with that, Mr. Palermo?
No. I don't want it to be part of the motion. I don't want, I thought was clearly said by Larry and Dan that it's not part of the, of our authority to make it as part of a motion. Even
Well, we're not-
Just so I'm clear, I didn't make it part of the motion.
But you s-
I think as a board, we're recommending it, but it's not officially
Okay,
part of the
so we'll have
Well, no, I
two
think
ayes or
it is.
nays tonight. We'll have two ayes or nays, one for the primary thing, and then the second one for the sprinkler system. There'll be two recommendations.
We're making a recommendation. We're not making it a condition. The recommendation is not necessarily a condition, Michael.
Yeah. But you're putting,
We're putting into writing that we strongly recommend that that be considered. But it's not the actual motion.
Could we have a restatement of what the motion is, Mr. Plukas?
Yeah, my intention when I made the motion was that the first would be DEC approval, and the second would be new plans to outline the replacement of the existing dock, the removal of the hot tub, and Mr. Blocky requested the tree removal. It was not my intention to include anything about the sprinkler.
So you don't want to make that recommendation
No,
whatsoever?
I think it should be separate and independent of our motion.
Okay, I thought that you were trying to make that as part of it. I'd also like, if you don't mind, Mr. Plukas, to mention that we also have to get zoning board approval, or that zoning board approval is necessary.
It's okay. Subject to zoning board approval.
For any zoning board issues.
Yep, for any variances that are required.
I thought that was assumed with any motion.
Not necessarily. Okay, given what Mr. Plukas has said, and I did remove the strongly recommended about the sprinkler system and so forth. But we would like that to be a part of the minutes, Larry, obviously, that we are making that
well, you can
strong.
make a separate
I think
recommendation for that.
I think that will come through very
Go through ayes or nays.
strongly.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor?
With the motion on the table, can I second that first?
Oh, absolutely, yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry. Mr. Goder, forgive me. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Good luck with it.
Congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Thornton, for...
Thank you.
Yes.
2 years' time.
And thank the Keeps for investing in Arundequoit. Did you like that?
Okay, for those people in the audience and watching on TV, our second item on tonight's agenda. I think you all know that the Land Tech subdivision approval for Drake Drive was pulled by the applicant 2 weeks ago prior to your workshop. So the second item on our agenda is the presentation for the Seneca Trail feasibility study by EDR. And I'll give Tom Robinson about 5 minutes to set up. And anyone need to go get some water or something?
So we'll take a recess for 5 minutes?
Take a recess for 5
5
minutes.
minutes? Mr. Anderson, thank you.
What is this presentation?
It's about this furthering about the trail. Remember we had the trail presentation? reconvene. Mr. Heininger, if you could read what this is, please, what we're doing.
I think Mr. Relli stole my agenda.
I did.
Okay. The notice that was in the paper was presentation for public attendance and comment for the Irondequoit Seneca Trail Feasibility Study. On July 22nd, EDR companies will present the final Irondequoit Seneca Trail Feasibility Study. This presentation will be at the regularly scheduled Irondequoit Planning Board meeting held at 1280 Titus Avenue in the Broderick Room at 7 p.m. following any public hearings and items for board action in front of the Irondequoit Planning Board. The meeting will also be broadcast live on Cable 12, and it's a presentation only, and the Planning Board will not be taking any action. So let me go from there explaining why we're here. The town received a $40,000 grant from Genesee Transportation Council to manage the feasibility study of building a trail from the end of the El Camino Trail down near the entrance to the zoo up to Pattonwood Drive area. And the town, of course, agreed to do that. The consultant selected to do the feasibility study was EDR, Environmental Design and Research. Part of the process of GTC is to have a minimum of 2 public meetings, and this is the second of those. We had an earlier one, I believe, in March, but the reason this is at the planning board is it's a regularly scheduled meeting. It's in a public building. We have adequate parking, and it is going to be on television, so for people who did not come out of the house tonight and are home, they're able to see the presentation. And so Tom Robinson from EDR will be presenting the findings of the study, which has been ongoing now for approximately 9 months, I think. And after Tom has made his presentation and the board has asked their questions, then my understanding is that the chairman will allow people up to 2 minutes to make a point or ask a question. And I again go back, this is not a design. Nothing has been designed. There are no construction plans. It's evaluating the feasibility of where it's easy to put in a trail, where the trail already exists, and where are the sticky wickets along the way to accomplish building a trail.
Thank you, Mr. Heininger.
Again, I think you want to emphasize that the reason that this presentation is made at this board is because it is an accessible outlet from here back to the public. This board takes no action with regard to what is in this particular study. It may go then to the town board for an acceptance of the report or not, but there will be no action taken by this board. This is simply a feasibility of what could be, maybe. The second point I think I would ask that the chair adopt is we have also taken the next step. Because in Irondequoit, we are always, always, always interested in hearing from people, hearing from our citizens or others with regard to how they feel about something in any event. So we've allocated 2 minutes for anybody to come up and give an observation or make a question. Tom, what I would recommend is this, though, because otherwise we don't want to have an unyieldy process. Instead of responding directly to each person who may, I assume, since there are a number of people here you want to speak, could you take note of questions or observations, let everyone come up and make their question or observation, and then at the end of all the public's 2-minute allocations, then respond to them in the order or in the best order that you see fit, if that's okay. I think that would make it a more orderly way, rather than go back and forth with people as they come up, okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
If I could just add something to it, in fairness to Mr. Robinson, the original plan here tonight was not to have public input, that we're not required to have any public input, but
As a matter of fact, Mr.
Discussing.
Palukas, if you would, not to interrupt you, sir, but because we are not required to have public input, if you would like to make that motion that we will have?
I certainly would, and we all approached each other during the break out of concern that so many of our friends and neighbors are here, obviously concerned, have questions, have, comments, or maybe just want to hear more, that we didn't feel it was right, if you were all here, to not let you at least say something if you want to say something. Obviously, you don't have to. So I would like to make a motion that we allow public input, but at the same time, if everybody understands, Mr. Robinson didn't come here tonight anticipating that it was going to be a question and answer session. So there may be questions that are asked that he can't answer, or he's not prepared to answer at this point, but we do want to hear what people have to say if you have anything to add.
So on that motion, may I have a second by chance?
I'll second it.
Mr. Blatchy, second it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, everybody. Mr. Robinson, the floor is
Okay.
yours, sir.
Great, thank you very much. My name's Tom Robinson. I'm from Environmental Design and Research. EDR is located at 274 North Goodman Street in the city of Rochester. Larry set this up pretty well. We've been working for about the last 9 months on a feasibility study for the Irondequoit Seneca Trail, which is being funded by the Genesee Transportation Council. Bob Torzinski from the GTC is here with us tonight. GTC commissions feasibility studies for trail projects that look to make a promising contribution to the regional trail network. The Monroe County and the greater Rochester area has a wealth of trails that are networked together. This system is growing in a very robust way and offers a wide range of benefits to communities that have these facilities. We started this project in the fall of 2012. Between November of 2012 and March of this year, we were involved in site inventory and analysis for this project. Our last meeting was here on March 25th, where we presented the results of the site inventory and analysis and the preliminary alternative concepts that we were looking at. The project objectives is just the purpose of the study is to assess the feasibility and provide a first-line schematic design and cost estimate for a multi-use trail from the north end of the El Camino Trail, where it hits Seneca Park, up to Pattonwood Drive, and making a connection to the Irondequoit Lakeside Trail. One of the big values of this project is that it would be able to connect those two existing trails and add to the regional system. The project area, the length of our trail corridor is about 3.6 miles. The current ownership of the corridor right now is divided between two owners. The 2 miles and the 2 miles plus or minus in the southern half are now owned by Monroe County, and then the remainder north of the county land is still CSX-owned former right-of-way. Objectives for this project, if the project moves forward, are to provide active transportation opportunities. That means non-motorized transportation use, walking and bicycling, as well as healthy fitness and recreational opportunities. Design a facility that would protect and enhance existing resources, certainly maintain user safety, offer a high-quality user experience, provide connectivity between community resources, and emphasize sustainability and maintainability over the long term. Multi-use trail projects really have a host of both economic and environmental benefits, but overall they can contribute to the quality of life and the community sustainability of the town of Irondequoit. Our inventory of the existing conditions was quite thorough. We looked at soils, we looked at topography, including steep slopes, hydrology and drainage, wetlands and streams. We had an environmental scientist, a biologist actually do a vegetation and ecological community survey. We looked at the scenic views and view sheds. We surveyed the existing trail conditions. Trail projects, road crossings are always a key issue, so we looked at those. We analyzed the existing culvert and drainage system that is out there now, taking care of the railroad bed. We looked at adjacent land use, property ownership, easements, and right-of-ways, and we mapped community destinations and points of interest that could be connected by this project. This is a fairly standard set of criteria that we go through when we look at the feasibility of a proposed trail corridor. A couple special things we looked at for this project. We did an initial mapping of homes that were in close proximity to where the trail would be placed. It's always a concern that trails are good neighbors. Right from the analysis stage and the planning stage, we try to look for points that would require special attention and maybe some special treatment in terms of buffers or visual screening or what have you. So we did just from aerial photos, so it's not incredibly precise, but we tried to look for a minimum of 50 feet between where the edge of the trail would be and where someone's home is. And we just identified on a map where there were clusters of houses that were within that guideline. So we know that there's areas that we need to pay special attention to as the project moves forward.
Mr. Robinson, could you, by chance, for the sake of everybody here, is it shown on that map where you're talking, those areas of concern?
Let me check. It is. It is.
Could you point that out, if you would, please?
Sure. You'll have a hard time seeing it from here, but there's little orange dots where your old houses are very close to the proposed trail corridor. I think we mapped, I want to say there were 49 homes that fell within that criteria. Most of them were south of Seneca Park Drive. There's bigger clusters closer down to the zoo. And then there's another cluster of homes that are in close proximity up at the north end of the trail. So again, that was just kind of a snapshot analysis to start to get an idea of where we would need to pay special attention. And that comes more into if the trail advances to the design phases, what are your design solutions for that? But I can explain a little bit more of how we're already thinking along those lines as we get to the concept.
If you would.
Are we talking 50 feet from their lot line or 50 feet from the structure itself?
Structure. We also looked, because this is a long trail corridor and it goes through some very naturalized areas, we identified areas that had what we call a low level of natural surveillance. So if you're going to use this trail, you end up in a fairly isolated, undeveloped area. We just want to identify those and not really passing judgment because there's two sides to that. For some people, having some seclusion in a natural environment is a real attraction, and that's going to draw certain users to the trail. But because of concerns for personal safety, we want to make sure that we know where those areas are that don't have a lot of natural surveillance and eyes on the trail. And again, as we move forward, they need to be considered in a special way. So that's just a couple of maybe non-standard site analysis tools that we applied to this project as we compiled our information. From the site inventory and analysis, we do a first round of feasibility assessment, and this is really just sort of a list of opportunities and challenges that we would have if we wanted to move forward and develop a trail in this corridor. Some of the opportunities are that we're very fortunate for a 3.6 mile trail corridor, there are no road crossings. Road crossings are always one of the bigger challenges when we do multi-use trails. Typically, they're expensive to deal with, and no matter how well you deal with them, they present safety issues and potential conflicts between vehicles and trail users. So we're very fortunate that this trail really has no road crossings that we need to deal with within the study length. There is a high level of connectivity to existing community resources. The report includes a chart of all the different points that are in close, easy walking distance and bicycling distance of the trail. It's extensive, so that's a great plus for the community. And then the existing trail connections between the El Camino Trail and the Irondequoit Lakeside Trail, between Seneca Park and Durand Eastman Park. There's a lot of potential for this to really add to a growing network of multi-use trails in the area. Some of the challenges that we have are in certain of the alternative trail alignments, we have a tough time meeting ADA compliance just because of the natural grades that we traverse. That's not a deal breaker, but it is something we try to consider. We obviously try to keep as high a level of ADA compliance as we can, and this trail would be challenged in certain stretches. The fact that there's two landowners involved, we think is sort of both a challenge and an opportunity. We've already had a great deal of contact with Monroe County, both Monroe County Parks and Monroe County Planning regarding this project. They've given us some solid input about what alternatives, what alignment they would like to see on their land holdings. So you don't have a large number of property owners that you would have to negotiate with to see this thing through. You basically have two, and one of them is really already on board, at least in concept, if not in financial support. So that's one of the challenges is the CSX ownership. So snapshot feasibility assessment, the trail is very feasible to move forward towards construction in the sense that there's not a lot of natural features obstacles and there's not a lot of infrastructure obstacles in our way. It would be a fairly easy project to build. From the feasibility assessment, we did look at different alternatives. When we came into this project last year, it looked fairly straightforward. We thought it was going to be a rails to trails project within the CSX right-of-way from one end to the other. Within a couple of months of starting our involvement, Monroe County made the purchase of the CSX right-of-way that's adjacent to the Seneca Park lands. So they now own, like I said, a little bit over 2 miles of this corridor. So that was a big change. And talking to them, they did not like the alternative with the trail going through the CSX corridor adjacent to their land. Because of some of the planning background and the nature of the Olmsted Park, they really wanted to see the primary trail through Seneca Park and through their parklands to be right along the river's edge, right on the bluff above the river. They felt that was more in keeping with the overall plan for the park. They wanted people to have good contact with the views and the natural resources. There already is a somewhat unimproved footpath along that stretch, so they saw the opportunity to actually move the trail to the west, so put it on the river side of the park rather on the railroad side of the park. Working with them, we came up with that preferred alternative. That's shown in the handout that some of you got. The benefit of that is, in that stretch, it does move it as far away as possible from the existing residences. So we solved some of the concerns with adjacent property at the south end, where we had space, and Monroe County actually preferred it being over on the other side of the trail. So that was the beginning of our trail alignment. The final concept that you see here for the trail is really a series of different trail segments working collectively to provide a safe, accessible experience for all different types of trail users. Maybe I'll just walk you through it quickly. It kind of divides itself up into 3 segments. If you look at the northernmost segment from actually Thomas Ave is where we connect all the way down to Seneca Park Ave. That piece of the trail is constrained, and that would be really just an improvement of the ad hoc footpath that's already along the CSX right-of-way there. So that piece of the trail, that northern piece, it would be just surface improvements, some regrading, some correction of drainage problems, but really just that is rails to trails. That's just a new, improved, multi-use path in the existing corridor. When you get south of Seneca Park Ave, the trail splits into a couple different segments. From the service area that exists in Seneca Park up to Seneca Park Ave, Monroe County had an old access road, actually, that's out there. If you go out there and walk it, you can see where this is. And their preference was to improve that stretch, and then pick up the footpath that's along the rivers, top of the river bluff, and improve that and make it into, I'll say, an AASHTO compliant multi-use trail. When we do multi-use trails, we try to conform to some certain design guidance from AASHTO, Federal Highway, New York State DOT. Basically, the minimum width that we're looking for is an 8-foot paved, stable, non-slip width. 10 feet is preferred, but in sensitive environments, we usually try to squeeze that down to lessen the impacts a little bit. The 8-foot width gives you comfortable passing for different users passing each other, as well as emergency vehicles and maintenance vehicles can get access out there and do what they need to do. So we want to minimize the environmental impacts, so we keep the surfaces as narrow as we can, at the same time providing for the use that's anticipated. Through Seneca Park, we actually break into a couple different parallel segments, with the primary footpath being along the river. At that point, we're trying to encourage cyclists, bicyclists who are trying to make this trip, to use the park roads. The park roads are low volume, low speeds, and they can conform to what's now called a shared use roadway, where you basically set it up so that cars and bicycles can comfortably coexist. There's some signage that goes with that. There's sharrows, the bicycle markings that go on the pavement. So now, basically, more or less south of Seneca Park Ave, in the Monroe County land, you have a primary foot trail along the river. You have bicycles being encouraged to use shared use roads in the park. And then the last piece is the existing trail along the abandoned CSX right-of-way, which is well loved by neighbors right now in its existing condition, just stays as is. We don't improve it. We don't try to limit access to it. People that are out there using it now will still have that outside their backyard. But we will be doing signage and information to push most of the trail use to the riverside of the park. So you have kind of three parallel strands working together. The emphasis is to make the best use of existing infrastructure. That helps us control the cost of the thing moving forward. We're trying to minimize site impacts. We really don't want to do major realignment or major earthwork. If anything, we want to stabilize some of the erosion problems and sedimentations that's happening out there now with the current trail conditions. We have generated, based on this very preliminary concept, part of our duty is to generate preliminary cost estimates. So we look at a very schematic level, how much this project would cost to build. We've done that. What's harder to factor in is what the acquisition cost of the CSX property would be. But we were able to make a fairly reasonable estimate of that based on what Monroe County paid for their piece of it just a year ago. So some assumptions are made, and obviously markets go up and down. But we try to get a handle on what the overall cost of this project would be moving forward. Part of the reason we do all this homework is if somebody steps up and advocates for the project and wants to take it to the next stage, you need to have all this baseline data to apply for funding from different sources. This is not a shovel-ready project. This is not designed, but we've looked at the feasibility, and we've looked at the potential costs, and we've looked at the opportunities and challenges. We have also provided a phasing plan in terms of how this might break out into construction. In this case, it's fairly simple. There's two big construction phases we see. The first of which would be on the Monroe County holdings, because we have a cooperative landowner and could probably move forward with that. The second phase of construction would be the rails to trails and the CSX owned land now, and obviously that has not been acquired, and that will take some time to move forward. Other things we do in the report is we look at additional steps that would be required to implement the projects, including seeker, including permitting, DEC wetland permitting. And we cover in an appendix form several different other bodies of information. We talk about trail construction standards. We suggest user guidelines. We touch on operations and maintenance. And we outline potential funding opportunities for this type of project. So all of that is included in the draft report. And then finally, what we've started doing recently is we try to compile the best data and reports that are out there related to community impacts of trails. It's very typical for people to be concerned about, well, a trail's going to go near my property, what's going to happen to my property value? Are there going to be impacts related to noise? Are there going to be impacts related to undesirable use? There is quite a lot of research out there, so we've compiled that. We did a summary of it, and that's included as an appendix to the report. It's fairly good reading. The best statistics are related to property values because obviously different realtor associations are really interested in this, and they've studied it. There's less information in terms of crime statistics and other things people are worried about. Our knowledge and working with other municipalities in this area is taking a trail from sort of an undeveloped area that people still have access to a bona fide and designed multi-use trail. You'll usually have more of the type of activity you desire and less of some of the activity you don't desire. So that's in the report, and it's good reading. It's interesting. It's by no means a perfect set of evidence or data, but we've got on the table what's available to us. And just our next steps moving forward, as Larry mentioned, we're kind of at the end of this. This is our draft report that the town's reviewing now. We are interested in hearing what people have to say. If they have any ideas, we want to hear them about what could make this a better project. So we'll compile whatever public input we receive here or through other sources. We'll finalize our recommendations, and we'll offer the report to the town and the GTC for their final review. And we hope that'll happen probably sometime next month. That's
Thank you,
all I
Mr.
got.
Robinson. What we're going to do, if no one has any objection, obviously on the board, we're going to do it as if it was a public hearing. So what I'd like to do is open it up to the board originally for any questions that you may have, and then we'll open it up to the public. I have several concerns. I would like to know more about who is doing the seeker process. That's one question. And Mr. Robinson, you can wait to the end, as I say, to answer as Mr. Heininger recommended, or Mr. Relly, recommended to answer all of those questions, if it's easier for you, so that there's no duplicity.
Sure, sounds good.
On your behalf.
All right.
I'd also like to know about, Mr. Goder brought this up, and I think it becomes a tremendous issue as it relates to property values. 50 feet from the structure, I'd like to know how residents are protected. It's not only negative activity, but trash, noise, et cetera. I'd like to have that kind of an answer, moving forward. I'd like to have a clearer understanding as to who will be responsible for maintenance and other types of safety that could occur, especially at night, along those trails, et cetera. Mr. Plukas, do you have any questions?
Just quickly, you talked about a growing network of trails, and you talked about the proposed Genesee River Promenade Boardwalk. Can you tell us what that is or what that consists of? I'm assuming that's north of this area along the river? You talk about the proposed Genesee River Promenade Boardwalk, something that this may eventually connect to in the first paragraph.
There's already the Irondequoit Lakeside Trail that runs from Pattonwood Drive, the harbor area, over to Seabreeze. So that's an east-west connector across the top of town. The El Camino Trail, which connects to downtown, is 2.25 miles. The Lakeside Trail is 4.8 miles. If you look on the first 11 by 17 on the west side of the river is the Genesee Riverway Trail that goes up through Turning Point Park. And when you walk this trail and look across the river, you can see the boardwalk going through the wetlands there at Turning Point. There's also a crossing of the river at Maplewood Park. It was probably constructed 10 or 15 years ago. So I think did that answer your question, Rich, of the connectors?
Yeah, it just says the trail's designed to link the existing El Camino with the existing Arundecoit Lakeside Multi-Use Trail and the proposed Genesee River Promenade Boardwalk.
Okay, the Promenade Boardwalk, actually, we had a meeting about that today, would go from the north end of this right as it curved over to Thomas Avenue up to Pattonwood Drive and would run along the river. And they describe it as a promenade boardwalk as opposed to a trail because it's going to be a little more formal and put people, the intent is to put people really, right close to the river and right close to the boats.
Okay.
Elevated from the boats because of the security that you can't right down on the boat dock, but it would be a elevated boardwalk along the river there.
Okay. So the design is to connect all of these things together eventually.
Yeah, because this shows us curving over to Thomas Avenue. The Lakeside Trail is actually Pattonwood Drive, so that would connect you up to the north, and then you have a choice of either going across the river, across Stutson Street Bridge, the O'Rourke Bridge, or going east to Seabreeze.
Okay. And the only other question I had is, are the materials that are here, are they going to remain here? So if anybody's watching at home and wants to come see this at some later point?
Those will remain here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Larry.
One other question that I'd like to add, and then I'll go over to Mr. Goder and Mr. Blatchy. You spoke about a wide or an immense amount of documentation. I think it would be beneficial for people to be able to access that documentation. Is it available virtually, et cetera? They're probably going to want, residents and friends are probably going to want to have an answer to that question. So,
we can provide everything posted on the college website or however you choose to distribute that.
Okay. Yes. Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Blatchy?
That was the question I had, so I'm all set.
Oh, I'm sorry. They didn't mean to do that. Mr. Goder?
Within the town of Arundecoit, there appears to be two major trailheads, that being at Thomas Avenue and the other one at the end of Seneca Park Avenue. Any plans in the works there for where people are going to park their cars? That's all private property in through there.
Those would be the only public parking.
When you say both ends of the trail, you mean at Seneca Park and at Thomas Avenue?
Yes.
And you don't show any property acquisition specifically at the Thomas Avenue end?
Mr. Robinson, if you're going to answer now as opposed to cumulatively later, could you please go to the podium if you would?
I'll answer later.
Okay. My concern is about the parking at Thomas Avenue and the trailhead probability of people parking at Seneca Park Avenue.
At this juncture, I'd like to open it up for public input. Again, following the typical rules of a public hearing, I'd like to limit discussion to 2 minutes, and I ask that you give your name and address upon arriving at the podium and addressing everyone. So at this point, whoever would like to make a comment, please come forward.
Come on up.
Come on up, Miriam.
Miriam Gans, 11 Covington Road. I'm actually president of the Friends and Neighbors of Seneca Park. And just one thing that Mr. Robinson said, he talked about bicyclists on the trail, the Riverside Trail in Seneca Park. And technically, somewhere in Monroe County Parks documents, it says that bikes can't access the trails that are not paved, the trails that go along, like the Riverview Trail there. So it's just something that you need to check and be aware of. You said something to the effect that you would discourage the bikes from going on those trails, but technically it is against, as I understand it, it's against park regulations for Olmsted Parks, which Seneca Park is.
Thank you, Mrs. Gaines. Anyone else?
Joe DeSpirito, 115 Winona Boulevard. My property backs up to the Seneca Park Zoo area down south of Seneca Park Avenue, and I know it's outside the scope of this. The gentleman indicated that there would be access, Forever Wild access. Is there a comprehensive plan with Monroe County on how that potentially will be used to, integrate with the existing trail? Because there's some fears that we will lose access to the lower Seneca Park from that. So it'd be interesting to see what the plan is. Also, you mentioned the 50-foot visibility from the house, from the actual home structure to the trail area. This time of the year, it's very deceiving. It's a wooded area, lots of leaves. We can't even see the zoo area from our properties. But come November, it's wide open. So visibility at the, non-leaf season is very important to the residents in that area. So, again, the main concern is access to the lower park from the residential area in Arundecoit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeSpirito. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Hugo Jelinek, 60 Beacon View Court, which is property adjacent to the railroad, so it's directly next to the proposed trail. My concern is that we know that on the other side of the river was a similar trail built several years ago, which goes from Peaton Street through the Turning Point Basin and ends somewhere around Lake Avenue where Kodak is. And we know a gentleman who lives in Charlotte year-round and who is connected with harbor security. He works with U.S. Border Patrol, with Coast Guard, and with police. And he told us that after that trail on the west side was built, the crime in the area went up substantially. So it's the opposite of what the gentleman over there was saying. And I would like to know where he got his number from. Other than that, we have also experience with children with motorbikes coming, bikes without license, and they ride for hours on the trail behind our property. So if that's what we are supposed to be looking forward to, not me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
If I can add quickly.
Sure.
I was told that the boundary between Rochester and Arundecoit is exactly in the middle of the where railroad tracks were. So I'm confused where the trail is going to be located. Half in Rochester and half in Arundecoit, and which police department is going to be needed to be called if necessary. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Michelle Reichert, 513 Winona Boulevard. We've just had recently some turnstiles, if you will, designed so that ATVs, big vehicles like that, can't get in and out of the park. But if we do that, or can get in and out of the trails, if we do that, that's already done, then how will security vehicles, fire department, police, ambulance, address concerns that are in there? How are they going to get in and out? I'm wondering. And my second concern is we've had robberies and break-ins on 500 block of Winona Boulevard, 200 block, 600 block, and the police come from Arundecoit and they say sorry, they came out of the woods in the park, we can't do anything. Next robbery, they come, sorry, we can't do anything, they came out of the woods and out of the park. So that's always a concern for us. Ronnequoit Police can't go too far back, it's not their jurisdiction. City can't go back there. County can go back there, but they're busy, they've got crime in the city, crime at Shalat, and they say, gee, we're awful sorry, we'll get there if we can. I'm sorry, if we can, which means, you know, it's very low on their list of priorities. So it's always a concern for us. We're the last for anybody to be able to realistically address any crime in our neighborhood. And it seems to me this is a quick getaway, an easy access for more people to come in and get away. And the Ronnequoit Police can't do anything, the city can't, and the county they're just pressed for staff. They apologize, but they really don't have the staffing to help us. So those are two things that we would like you to think about.
When you
Thank you.
call, a question for you, when you make the call for assistance, who do you, are you calling 911?
We were advised by the county to call 911 and say we are in Ronnequoit or there's an issue in Seneca Park, to please call the county sheriffs because they're the only one that can go down there.
Okay, good.
So like in our neighborhood, the police can come, they can come to my house, but they can't go behind my house because that's a woods and a park and it's not their jurisdiction. So they're challenged in that sense.
I understand.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. The
Great.
county's great about it. They just don't have the manpower to help us. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anyone else care to share your thoughts or concerns? Yes, sir.
David Marley, 64 Westbourne Road. And I'm just going to echo a couple of the sentiments that have already come out. I also just wanted to say that I think in broad strokes, the idea of this trail network is, there's a lot of positives around it. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. Just the ability to have some interconnectedness between these other great trail resources we have. That's a positive if other issues can be worked out and, you know, other concerns. One concern I have, and this probably isn't the right forum because I think it's more directed towards the county and what they're doing with the acquisition of that property and rumors about expansion and things being done with the zoo and possibly putting in an access road and possibly cutting off that access to the lower park. And I don't know if that comes into the fold of the plan, but that's, I guess, my question is that part of the dialogue of this trail network is what might be going on the Irondequoit side of the zoo. We heard that there was talk about wanting to put a service road down through there. It's hard to imagine how the zoo could expand that much and there still be a reasonable level of access for people in the neighborhood to get down into the lower park. So that's concern number one, or question number one. The second thing about safety that's been brought up a lot, and just to echo, again, I don't know if this is the right forum for it, but whatever these sort of jurisdictional issues are about public safety and this police organization or sheriff organization not being able to respond is something that at some levels really got to get worked out because we've had safety issues. My wife had an incident in the park once with being approached by some men, and she called 911, and they couldn't come to our house to talk to us because we're in Irondequoit. So they said if we went back to the park and waited, somebody would come in and meet us at our car, I guess. And so these jurisdictional issues that several people have brought up are really, really valid. You know, like as residents, I shouldn't feel, you know, because I'm close to some border that I can't call 911 and expect, you know, a response. And this maybe isn't the right forum for that, but it certainly if the trail is going to go forward, it's just going to amplify some of those concerns about what authority can respond, you know, if there's an issue. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Thank you, Mr. Marley.
Thank you for the opportunity to
Thank you.
speak.
I'm Jessie Bro, 249 Totem Trail, and the tip of my backyard is one of those low natural surveillance areas. So as opposed to worrying about which law enforcement agency is going to respond when there's a problem, I'd like to know what we could do to prevent those problems, what's going to prevent people on the trails from cutting through our backyards to get to Seneca Park Avenue to get out of the trail area. And it's DEC natural wetland area, but if it's accessible from the trail, there's nothing that'll keep people out of there. And on one of the maps, there's a wetland view with an arrow pointing directly at my pool. And that makes me a little uncomfortable. I don't know what a wetland view is, but if it's like a raised platform, like the other gentleman said, in the summer you can't see anything, but as soon as the leaves are down, I don't want to see people from my deck walking on the trail or have them seeing me on my deck. So just more preventatively, just wondering what will be done to keep our houses, which are very close to the trail, safe.
So you're looking for a privacy determination?
Privacy
in
and
essence?
protection and safety, because, you know, we've been fortunate not to have called the Irondequoit police for that kind of, issue yet, but I'd like to keep it that way.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to share their thoughts or opinions on this?
Good evening. I am Margaret Burns, and I live at 288 Chapel Hill Drive. I want to start out with a couple compliments. One is thanks for this unusual opportunity for people to speak. I appreciate it. Number two, I am one of those 49 orange dots. And a compliment to go with that is I do recognize that this is not my or my husband's personal playground. We've had the benefit of that close proximity to the park, and we're excited for more people to be able to use and view the beauty of the Parks Department. The next compliment, and the third one, goes to Monroe County Parks Department and the Irondequoit Police Department. I have had either the fortunate or unfortunate opportunity to call 911 multiple times, as I will call our house kind of the gatekeeper. Again, we are the very last property along the trail in that midsection, just between the park itself and Seneca Park. And we found that their response is always swift. But again, to the other speaker's point, they will come and they will help us the best they can. And so I'm going to leave that as a compliment and then move on to just some of the concerns. I did hear as part of the presentation that the crime statistics, we don't have much information on that. We have, I think, maybe multiple ways that we can access that information, and I think that would be helpful as we move on with the project to make sure that the safety of not only the homeowners but those that use the trail, how we get to them, to another speaker's point, will be embedded into the next steps as to how to use the trail. On the CSX trail itself, I think right now the county is calling that area, they want it to naturally reforest. With some of the use, I'm having a tough time seeing how it will really ever reforest by itself. So I am curious how that natural reforestation is going to occur. The other piece is right now the fencing that is on both the park side and the residence side. I'm really hoping that we can address the fencing, not only keeping some of that, because I think it's a good barrier and a safety barrier, but also the maintenance of that as time goes on. Right now, Monroe County has been a good partner, and actually they were a good partner when CSX owned that as well. So, and my last question is also, why are we measuring 50 feet from the structure versus the property line? And how many more people would actually be impacted if we took it from the property line? I mean, it would be a lot more people. So those are my questions and those are my compliments. And again, I'm actually looking forward, my husband and I, to next steps and again, giving greater access to more people in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Anyone else? like to share their comments, concerns, opinions, etc.? Mr. Robinson, at this juncture, if you would like to address some of the concerns that have been mentioned, but I would also ask you, sir, if at all possible, when you put up this further documentation, or bring the documentation so that one of our people can put it on our website, as we mentioned before, what I'd like to do or recommend, if I may, is because I know you copiously wrote down some of the questions and concerns, you might want to also answer those concerns for residents on the website, because I'm sure those concerns are mutual to many who may not be in attendance this evening, and give them the opportunity to access your thoughts and perhaps further the discussion next month, if you would.
Well, I'm going to answer what I can more in general categories rather than one by one. But I'm very open to discussing one-on-one with anybody who has more concerns and wants more detail. I'll give it where I can because it's not a design project. We don't have a great deal of detail. But there's some obviously we got some common threads here. So let me answer what I can. And then what we do is we do a compilation of all the public input we received. That becomes part of the report. And there were some very good suggestions in here. We're hearing some concerns. We'll try to address those in the study at the concept level we're at as best we can. So I thank you for coming out and giving the input that you did, because it does help us provide a better project to the town and the GTC. Let me see. Seeker, what we do in the report is outline the process that needs to happen. At this point, we don't know who would be the lead agency because we don't know who's going to own this facility. So it's just very broad strokes. Essentially, you need to go through Seeker or whoever ends up with lead agency as the project and ownership resolves itself. The same is true for really trail maintenance. What we say in the report is the best hope for this thing to actually get built. It would be some kind of partnership between entities, possibly Monroe County with the town of Arundecoit. There may be another entity involved. The Genesee Land Trust has expressed interest in this project. One of their members is on our task force. So there's some advocates and interested parties. Likely would have to be some type of partnership to move it forward, just because no one party probably has the resources or wants to take on the whole responsibility. We do see Monroe County as a major player in this. Obviously, more than half of this trail is proposed on their property, but how the rest of it resolves itself in terms of ownership and afterwards, aftercare and maintenance remains to be seen. We'll make our best recommendations about a logical path to go down, but we can't answer that at this point. We do provide an outline of maintenance and management guidelines for these types of facilities, so at least it makes it into the report what needs to happen to have one of these be sustainable and well-maintained over time. Obviously, it's our concern, too, the number of homes that are within close proximity. The 50 feet is just, we could pick 100 feet, we could pick 25 feet, we could pick a number. We picked a number, really just so we could start to get an idea where the clusters of close homes were. It was more that than the exact distance and whether it's the property line or structure. From a design point of view, we're actually more concerned with from the structure to the trail, because how we do buffers, space is a very important thing, and the pure distance. We also look at different types of vegetative screening. We talk about physical barriers. Fencing is important, and we've applied fencing in other trail projects when there are homes in close proximity. And so there's a number of design measures we can take that we use, and as it goes towards construction design, we can get more into how to address specific concerns. Let's see. The question came up about parking and trailheads. What we want to see in a corridor this length is one at each end. We think we got the Seneca Park end pretty well marked down because there's public parking there. We're still studying the north end and trying to figure out how we could provide that. It's private property. There is a lot of pavement. There's certainly a lot of room for trailhead parking, which is typically not large. Even for well-used trails, a trailhead might have 10 spaces or 12 spaces, something to that effect. So we hope to include some concept for that at the north end. And then along the length of the trail, what we're with you. We want to see the access to the south part of Seneca Park and this trail system maintained. We think that's an important part of the project.
North part of Seneca Park.
I'm sorry, yes, yeah. It's important for us to have the community connectivity. And we usually identify places where people are accessing trails and open space currently, and where possible, we try to maintain that. So we appreciate your comments. We're definitely on the same page there. I'll skip to your question. We're not aware of any comprehensive plan that Monroe County has for the park or what they're going to do with this newly acquired land. They have not indicated to us any plans one way or the other. They've reviewed what we're proposing, and right now we're proposing that piece of the CSX, the southern piece of the CSX as it gets to close to the El Camino Trail, would stay as is, as a unimproved local footpath. And we haven't had any indication from anybody that anybody's got any plans for anything different. So we're proceeding along those lines. And I haven't seen, we do our research and we try to gather all the relevant planning documents. In fact, EDR does a lot of the master planning for Monroe County Parks. I don't think they have anything else on the table at this point, or so we've been told. Let me see. Yeah, the crime statistics are an interesting thing. And believe me, we dig around as much as we can because we want to have a real handle on this. The reports that we've compiled, which are from all over the country, what data there is kind of indicates the other direction. When you have an old railroad right-of-way or an old access road that's kind of a semi-formal trail that people can get on there, but it doesn't have a lot of real high level of legitimate use, those tend to be more problematic than a functional, sanctioned, multi-use trail where a lot of people are out there a lot more times, just riding their bikes or walking or using it. That is, as we think, the best defense against crime along a trail is to have eyes on the trail and have a high level of different user groups using it at all seasons of the year. So that's what we try to promote. We regularly contact different local police departments and try to get data and information on this. I will follow up, Hugo, I'll follow up on your comment about the Border Patrol and what they were saying about the trail on the west side. We'll try to follow up on that and see if we can get some information. I hadn't heard anything about that. You're also concerned about motorbikes on the trail. This would be a no motorized use trail system. Now, how do you control that? Well, that's challenging. But what we found is dirt bikes and ATVs really want the challenge. So once you make a nice smooth trail that's attractive to pedestrians, it's not as interesting to them. And we've had fairly good success on other projects where once you stabilize the trail and make it conform to multi-use standards, they tend to find other places that are more exciting for them to ride. As well as you raise the population and the degree of use of people just walking and riding their bikes. ATV riders are people too, and they don't want conflicts, generally speaking, more than anybody else. So again, we think there's probably an upside to having the trail designed and built and legitimate multi-use being encouraged there. I was interested to hear about the emergency response and the jurisdictional issues. We'll try to give some thought to that. We don't have a lot of control over that. The city line is very interesting, how it jogs. It's on our, well, I'll put up the newer map. It's on our newer map, and it's not right down the middle. It's actually one side or the other. But essentially this trail, this CSX right-of-way is the border between Rochester and the town of Irondequoit. But we do have that mapped from the GPS layers and GIS layers, and we're being as accurate as we can. Emergency vehicle access is an important part of this concept. That's part of why we want a stable 8-foot wide surface so that can happen. It's very rare, but if somebody needs to be, gets injured or needs to be evacuated from the trail needs to perform that function. So we hold to that minimum width, and we have a trail cross-section that supports vehicle loads and basic engineering and so forth. Jess C. was concerned with people cutting through the property. The delineation between public space and private space is a really important part of these projects. We talk about how important it is. We usually just give sort of an idea of things that can happen. Again, that really happens during the design process. But it's usually just having the clear definition. I mean, people wander off trails and into private property most often just because they don't know until they get to your swimming pool or get close to your house and they're like, it must be off the public land. When we worked with Monroe County on new trails in Irondequoit Bay Park West and Tryon Park, it was a big deal, and we designed a system for them to mark park properties, because when you're out in the woods, it's really hard to tell where and whose property you're on. So the edges of the trail, the definition between public and private space is an important part of the project. And it can be visual, it can be soft materials like plantings, or it can be hard materials like fencing where it needs to be. So we have a vocabulary and some tools we can choose from to address that. Let's see, and then there were more notes about the close proximity, which obviously we recognize that as an issue right away. Different projects, we might choose a different minimum distance. In an urban trail, looking for at least a 50-foot visual buffer is a pretty good starting point. But again, that can change, and we recognize that we do have houses of concern here. And I think as this thing moved forward and was looking at more development type thought, we'd probably want to have more input and really have one-on-one meetings, because it'll change. I mean, there's different needs. There was questions about the existing fencing that's out there now. My understanding is Monroe County wants to take down their fence that's on that would be the west side of the trail. So between the trail and the park, they no longer want to have that separation, which makes sense. It's all going to be their property. I think they want to have the separation between their property and private property. So whatever fencing is there, if anything, that might get enhanced and beefed up where needed as part of this project. But everybody supports the idea of a definition between the public space and the private space. So that's my responses in summary.
Pretty complete, Mr. Robinson.
I tried to write down everything everybody said. There were some good suggestions. We're going to work those into our report, and we'll try to address these in the final document.
One last question for you that I forgot to ask earlier. Where can fellow residents and other concerned people access information about future informational meetings? Or where they may be, or will you be holding any?
Well, this is our second of two sessions like this. I think the best bet for going forward is to make sure that we get all the information up on the town website so it's fully accessible. We're not planning on having another public session as part of this meeting. But you can channel comments to Larry or directly to EDR, and I will respond to any concerns that anybody else has.
Okay, super. Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
As Tom said, that EDR is at the tail end of their contract, so they'll be wrapping up the report and including these comments so that if and as this moves forward, whatever consultant is working on this knows what this communication is and can take those kind of comments if this does go to a design phase.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Thanks.
At this juncture, having no further business before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Aye. Yes. It was Lucas.
Lucas.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Very nice job, sir.
Thank you, sir.